a little late sharing my thoughts for Sarah J. Maas's second book in the Throne of Glass series, which is Crown of Midnight. Now, admittedly, I'm late sharing my thoughts because I was late even finishing the book. I was supposed to read this book in April in its entirety, but unfortunately, this kind of bled through into around mid-May. When I recorded my first Throne of Glass read-along review kind of video, I deliberately did that, so I recorded the video before I started the second book. Basically, so my thoughts weren't kind of muddled with the knowledge of later books. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't really able to do that because I was running late with Crown of Midnight. So I basically ended up reading Crown of Midnight and then I finished Heir of Fire in the second half of May in order to catch up. So I have read that third book as of recording, but thankfully the events in each book are quite distinct so that I can talk about the events of Crown of Midnight and my thoughts on what took place without being too influenced, I don't think, by Heir of Fire. Now, I'm deliberately doing this recording now before I start the fourth book, just to try and keep things as simple as possible. Crown of Midnight is around 420 pages, so it's on the shorter end of the books I've read so far. I picked this up from my library in a digital format, so that was the way I approached this particular book. Now, I think reading the book on my phone did impact my overall enjoyment. It's not my favourite way of doing it, but I haven't figured out a way to basically borrow my digital library books in any other way. I used to be able to put them on my Kindle, and I'm not impacted in that I have an old device on my Kindle. It just doesn't seem to work anymore. So I end up reading them on my phone, and I don't love doing that. So that definitely kind of factors into how long it took me to read Crown of Midnight. But nevertheless, that's what I had to work with. I also approached Heir of Fire with the same kind of method, but I'm taking a little bit of a different tack with Queen of Shadows, so we'll see if that helps any. Let's recap the synopsis of Crown of Midnight, and then I can actually share what I thought about this book with you. From the Throne of Glass rules a king with a fist of iron and a soul as black as pitch. Assassin Selena Sardothian won a brutal contest to become his champion. Yet Selena is far from loyal to the crown. She hides her secret vigilantly. She knows that the man she serves is bent on evil. Keeping up the deadly charade becomes increasingly difficult when Selena realizes she is not the only one seeking justice. As she tries to untangle the mysteries buried deep within the glass castle, her closest relationships suffer. It seems no one is above questioning her allegiances. Not the Crown Prince Dorian, not Kale, the captain of the guard, not even her best friend Nehemia, a foreign princess with a rebel heart. Then one terrible night, the secrets they have all been keeping lead to an unspeakable tragedy. As Selena's world shatters, she will be forced to give up the very thing most precious to her and decide once and for all where her true loyalties lie, and to whom she ultimately is willing to fight for. So what I particularly love about Crown of Midnight is how we effectively take this already established world in book one with elements of history and all the kind of the world building that goes with that, which is already pretty substantial, and then it just gets so much bigger. Crown of Midnight builds on that first book really well. So much so, like, there is enough overlap right at the very beginning of the book, I suppose, that gives us the continuity we need that shows it's a series. But then it starts blowing it up even within the first 10% of the book. So it goes to show that this series is overall going to be huge, and a lot of time and effort has gone into building this overall world, the magic system, the history that's taken place, to basically have this kind of tinder pot that's eventually, something's going to happen, something's going to explode. So I was really impressed by book one, to be perfectly honest, in terms of its world building, I went into it thinking it was going to be very kind of romancy. It wasn't too bad. It was very fantasy with just a hint of romance. And that is the case for Crown of Midnight, but I was astounded really at how quickly this book just went from this little starting point of Throne of Glass and then just went, let's make it bigger. I loved exploring the magical side of the story. I appreciate kind of magical realism isn't for everybody, and that is absolutely fine. But I really enjoy that as a genre overall. And I loved exploring how, kind of the magic was eradicated, I suppose, although not really. And what has taken place before and what clues Selena has to work with in Crown of Midnight in order to kind of explore what's happening, why things are happening, and really get to the bottom of what's going on. We also get some more ties to Selena's backstory in this particular installment, which goes into more detail in Heir of Fire, so I'm not going to spoil anything. Well, I'm not going to spoil anything anyway. But really kind of the main hint as to what happens is in book 3, but we do get some teasers in book 2, which I really enjoyed finding out about, and being teased for that to try and work it out for myself helped add to the overall kind of mystery of what's going on in this plotline. The big shock factor event kind of happens at the end of the first part of the book, if I remember correctly, and it is heartbreaking as much as the synopsis says. I kind of finished that section of the book and I almost didn't want to read on because I just had to get over what happened. And it's obviously a great plot device in terms of what happens next, how Selena continues on. But yeah, this thing that happens it's almost inducive to bringing in a book hangover. I didn't know what to do next after reading that. I think I took a little break after that actually, just because I was just headcanon, okay, don't know what to do now. So I loved it overall. I think it had a really good, it had its place in the overall storyline. Did I want it to happen? No. Do I see why it happened? Yes, if you know what I mean. So overall, fantastic. Although at the time, I was a bit shocked. Wasn't sure what to do with that information. But yeah, overall, it works really well for the wider plot and giving Selena a bit of a kick up the bum, really, because she needs it. I suppose, really, this is kind of hard to talk about without giving things away, and I'm determined not to give things away, because if you want to talk about these things in more detail, then the best place to do that would be on my Fable and StoryGraph read-alongs. This is more promo for that, and obviously it is somewhat providing a review as I'm reading them. But here is not the place for spoilers, okay? I don't want to ruin things for everyone. So it's hard to talk about the ending without talking about the ending. But I suppose what I can say is that I loved how this book then set up the series again for further expansion. So whereas I loved the jump in between book 1 and 2 where things got even bigger, we are very much set up at the end of book 2 for that to happen again. So I loved that kind of setup where I knew to expect that in book 3, and I knew I could enjoy that all over again in starting Heir of Fire. It also had me asking some questions of what could possibly happen next, because we are taken away from what we know to a certain extent from that's been established in book 1 and 2. It takes us off on a tangent that, we don't know, what could happen next, how things are going to tie back, so really characters that have been established in the book so far really start splitting off. Very Game of Thrones-esque, I suppose, where everyone starts together and then kind of shoots off. It seems like we're starting to do that. So I'm intrigued, obviously, to see where that goes, and I was looking forward to exploring that in Heir of Fire. But really, it just goes to show how much more this series has to offer in terms of its world building and the fantasy elements that are taking place. So again, very impressed with this series for that aspect rather than just focusing on kind of love triangle-y stuff. Which kind of smooths me on to the point I want to make about the love triangle, because that was probably one of the aspects I was less keen on in this book. Don't get me wrong, it's a good plot device in terms of everything that's going on. But personally, as someone who doesn't love or pine for romance in my books, it served a function. It wasn't something I was personally invested in. Now, I know plenty of romance readers out there are out there picking sides as to whether they're Team Dorian or Team Kale. Whatever. I don't know. Probably neither. I don't know. It's not something I'm actively invested in this book. So yes, it has romance elements. It's not what I'm here for, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I don't know what else to say about that. It serves a good function for moving the story on, and we have the elements of things going really well and things not going so well that influence what Selena does in the wider storyline. But beyond that, it was fine. My only other niggle, I suppose, with this book is that when taking what we know in book 1 and then expanding it as much as we did in book 2, there was a lot of explaining, I suppose, and a lot of world building that happens in the first half of the book that slowed the pace down for me. So I'd had hoped it was going to be a little bit quicker, which I think also factored into why it took me so long to read this book. It took a while for me to get into, obviously learn all this new information. But again, once things start ramping up and, things start coming to a head, then I kind of ran away with the book. And, things got much quicker and I was invested in finding out, kind of where this book was going to end. So we have two very different kind of pacing points, I suppose, where early in the book it was quite slow, which was a bit of a shame. But obviously there is some function to that in that it lays down a lot of kind of the new material that we get in Crown of Midnight. But then it moves pretty quickly once things start to happen. So I wish it was maybe a little bit quicker. Maybe things could be spread out a little bit more throughout the book to make the pacing a little bit more consistent. But that's really kind of my only other niggle with Crown of Midnight. Considering this is a series I'm basically picking up to challenge myself. It's not something I would read but naturally, or of my own volition anyway. This is a stretch for me. It's not something I would actively go for. So there are challenges to picking up this series. But saying that, there are elements to these books that have surprised me so far. And overall, I'm liking them more than I had expected. So those are my thoughts on Crown of Midnight. I've enjoyed reading these books so far. I'm really keen to see where this series goes in terms of the overall scope of its magic and world building and all that kind of good stuff. As of recording, I have also read Heir of Fire, so I'm going to share my thoughts on that one, probably not this week, next week, just to catch up. Hopefully I will have only just kind of started Queen of Shadows, so my thoughts aren't too muddied by that at the very least. But yeah, if you want to join me in this read along, I would love for you to get involved either on StoryGraph or Fable, and once the book is done, I'll obviously be sharing my next review here on YouTube. Have you read the Throne of Glass series? Is it a stretch goal for you, or is this your genre? Let me know in the comments what you thought of Crown of Midnight, and I look forward to seeing you in my next review.